Welcome back to the Pinkbike Weekly Show. We've got a good episode lined up today because we've got Dario in the house. So we're going to kick things off with a 2-minute tech segment. After that, we're going to let you know about one of the latest, hottest topics in mountain biking. We're going to chat all about it before we send it into a Recreational Wrecks segment, followed by the latest Pinkbike podcast episode. Let's get started. I'm stoked to have Pinkbike tech editor Dario in the house today, and we're going to kick things off now with 2 minutes of tech all about electronic suspension.
There we go, me.
To you, man.
Have fun over there, little guy. Greetings, Dario here with 2 minutes of tech. Today I am talking about the new RockShox Flight Attendant trail suspension system. About 3 months ago, RockShox came to market with new cross-country flight attendant that was focused on the SID, fork, and shock, and made a lot of sense for that market. You know, it's super efficiency focused. It's all about maximum speed on tracks, locking your suspension out whenever possible. And now RockShox is applying that technology to the trail market. So that's everything from the Pike to the Lyric to the Zeb fork, and also includes the Super Deluxe shock and both Vivid and Vivid coil options. That's a ton of different products that it's touching, but essentially you're going to start seeing that little battery-powered computer on the damper side of the fork and a battery mount on the damper of the shock. Those two are talking to each other. They also require a pedal sensor, so you're going to have a torque meter or a little pedal sensor on your cranks. Apparently it also helps to have a transmission derailleur and even an access seat post, because all of those things kind of feed information into the system. That starts to snowball pretty quickly and get a bit expensive, but if you want just the fork and the shock, prices vary a bit by the model, but are about $400 to $500 more than the stock option. So that's like, if you're looking at a Zeb, for instance, a brand new Zeb Charger 3.1 is about $1,100. The Flight Attendant version is about $1,500. So super expensive, definitely kind of a niche use case. I think maybe some racers will benefit from this, maybe people who really feel sensitive to the efficiency of a bike. But I think in my eyes, what's interesting here is the potential for building a bike around the system. You could start to have, say, a big enduro bike that doesn't pedal well at all and is biased totally towards the descents, but can use the Flight Attendant system as a crutch in order to add some efficiency to that system. I'm curious to see if we start, noticing any differences in bike design as systems like this start to become more popular. One important thing to note on the new Flight Attendant, unlike the initial version years ago that was built on kind of an old damper technology, the current Flight Attendant is the brand new Charger 3.1. So at its core, you have the best RockShox suspension they've ever had. I genuinely find that to be the case. Like, the new Zeb feels excellent. The new Vivid coil I've been running on my bike feels excellent. One other thing to note, Vivid and Vivid coil cannot be bought aftermarket. I'm not entirely sure why, but so far we'll only be seeing those on specific builds. If you are curious about the new Flight Attendant suspension, it's worth checking fitment. The fork adds quite a bit of stack height to the damper, and the shock has a lot of bulk to it. So there's a kind of meager list currently, but there's a list of bikes that have been approved for fitment for this stuff. It's worth checking. If your bike's not on that list, shoot an email to the manufacturer or to RockShox, and they will be able to help you out. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Dario, for filling us in on that information today. And I wanted to start today's episode with the 2-minute tech segment because I think I and a lot of other viewers out there just have a lot of questions about the era that we're living in with electronic suspension, shall we say. I mean, we see it a lot on the World Cup circuit, cross country, enduro now as well, and downhill. I mean, there's no denying the fact that this stuff makes a difference when you're out on a track like Leogang, for instance, where Loic Bruni was just cruising through those speedway jumps. So I guess like the first question I have, and you did touch on it a little bit there, but who is this electronic suspension really designed for? Who's in mind?
I think you touched on it well. It's for the racers in my eyes, especially on the cross-country front. I think it makes a lot of sense there. You look at pretty much every major team that has a suspension sponsor that makes some sort of electronic suspension is running it. I think to various degrees. Like, Some people probably still prefer a manual lockout, just for whatever psychological perspective. But especially in the XC world, I think the racers really seem to be moving in that direction. On the downhill front, it's definitely track to track in terms of who's using it. The talk of the town is like Loic's running the 5-button setup on his Specialized bike. That's a boutique Öhlins system that I don't think will ever come to market, but whatever it's doing, it seems to be working for him. You mentioned the Leo Gang track. I think that motorway is like a unique situation in the World Cup generally. It's like super high speed with like very important speed generating backsides. Even there, I think the margins are pretty slim when you compare suspension with an electronic lockout to just traditional open suspension. You look at the people who do well in those sections, just do well in those sections. Like they're good at riding rhythm. They're really good at pumping for speed. So I don't know that the electronics are like really like rocketing them ahead of the competition, but
marginal gains.
Yeah, for sure. And then in the enduro front, like you see, like Fox has some sort of black box shock that's been on a few different bikes. We've got the RockShox stuff. No electronic Öhlins that I can think of on that front. They do have some XC things, but maybe in that race scenario, it's more for like the liaison efficiency and just like general fatigue that comes over a day.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about like the liaison fatigue. You're pedaling sometimes an hour between these enduro stages to then drop in, be fatigued. It kind of makes me think about, like, I watch Formula One and Supercross, and they're traditionally using these like new advancements in technology there and testing it and then bringing it into the market. And that's what we've seen, especially from RockShox. But I guess my next question is just, especially the downhill stuff that we're seeing at all the World Cup races, who in their right mind is then going to go spend an extra $500 on a fork that retails for, close to $2,000 for the downhill stuff? Maybe
like the super keen atavist racer. I don't see a lot of like regular mountain bikers going out and buying like the highest end electronic downhill suspension. Especially, I think you could definitely make the argument that, again, on like a cross country bike, even just a hobbyist is going to enjoy having that experience. I think it might improve the experience for some people, especially if you're like, you prefer to climb hard and like put down power. It does benefit those circumstances. But I think on the downhill front, I don't know, a lot of people around here own downhill bikes to go to the park, just like ride dirt merchant laps, and like you don't need electronic suspension to have fun on dirt merchant.
No, but now that you say that, another thing that comes to mind is like having a bike that can ride dirt merchant efficiently, hitting all the jumps, making it to the landings, but then go onto a lap like Schlayer or Canadian Open that's just absolutely rugged and gnarly.
For sure. Yeah, the having like a, I guess that's what we're talking about this like very abstractly, but like currently we don't know a lot about what Loic and Öhlins and Specialized are working with. I think theirs is probably like a damper adjustment because there's so many buttons. So it's some sort of spectrum that they're working within. But like the RockShox stuff that I've been riding is open, pedal, closed. It's not changing the characteristics of your damping, it's changing the state that they're in.
Which we used to just do with a good old fashioned
Right, so
lever.
Like in a way, like you're not gonna run open on Canadian Open downhill and run pedal on dirt merchant. You'd get bucked and that would be scary. You're gonna run your stuff open no matter what. So I think as we start to get into systems with more fidelity in terms of like changing high speed, changing low speed, changing rebound speeds, then perhaps, it'll start to tune to like the nature of a track, but then you'd have to have some sort of like pre-programmed, this is what I'm using sort of thing. And that's a little more thought than I want to put into it. I just kind of want to like get off the chairlift and go down the hill.
Well, quickly to wrap this up, I mean, you've been testing the RockShox stuff, you're familiar with the Fox and the Öhlins. So what are just a couple of pros and cons to electronic suspension in your opinion?
I mean, the biggest pros for me come on the cross-country platform. Again, I keep harping on it, but I think like, say on the Epic, I have the Flight Attendant XC stuff. On that bike, it is pretty remarkable. I think like when you sprint, the thing is super efficient. It's locked out. It feels like you're...
And it's like instantaneous.
Yeah, I think on the trail bike, the algorithm's identical between the two, so it's acting the same way. I just think that the benefits you reap from that are a lot less. and less applicable. Like my big 40-pound enduro bike doesn't need a lockout. It's like cruising no matter what. You know, maybe it's marginally helped by a lockout, but even RockShox in their come to market with the XC stuff was advertising like a 1.8% gain over like a 90-minute cross-country race, which is actually significant in that context. But like for me, going on like a long afternoon ride, it's not mates. Like, yeah, I'm not like, oh, I got 1.8% better time up the like, you know, 5,000 foot fire road climb. It's not, I mean, maybe that would be nice, but in my eyes, like that's what a single lockout switch is for. So I don't know. I think it's very much case by case. Some people are going to love this and think that they absolutely need it. We're going to see some pretty cool bike builds coming with it, I think. But for me at the moment, it definitely does still bias towards the XC side of things. But I'm excited to start riding like the coming iterations of electronic stuff.
Exciting. Well, when that happens, we'll make sure to bring it to all of you and the viewers at home. But for now, hop into the comments. Let us know what you think about electronic suspension. Is this something that you're going to hunt out on your next bike? Are you looking to maybe upgrade what you have now? Let us know. Moving on, we are back with another segment of Recreational Wrecks because unfortunately, I have seen more wheel issues come about in the last week. My homie, not myself, was riding in the Whistler Bike Park the other day, rode Filthy Ape, which just, it's a double black rock roll type thing, but there's just a lot of holes and chunder along the way. Boom, smashed, catastrophic carbon wheel explosion up there. Back wheel. Okay, good. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of begs the question of like, especially in the bike park, are you gonna run aluminum or carbon wheels? I'm not.
Well, I am picky, but I run what comes on a bike. So if a bike comes spec'd with aluminum rims, I'll run that. If it's carbon, I'll run that. Sometimes I'll experiment between the two. On my personal bikes, I do prefer carbon. It comes down mostly for me to just how often I have to pay attention to them. Work on my bikes a lot because I ride a lot, but I prefer to not have to. So an aluminum rim can ride better in certain circumstances. I think like rough, off camber, like really chattery tracks can be made better by an aluminum rim, and you can get amazing durability out of them for sure, but writ large, you're gonna have to true that wheel more. You're gonna have to like focus on pulling dents out of it if you're really railing stuff. When carbon has a mistake, it's a pretty singular mistake, but I haven't broken that many carbon wheels in the past few years. They've gotten really good. The tech is good. I don't know, the durability is there too, I think. Plus, like, tons of brands have lifetime warranties on stuff. So if you crack a rim, like, you just send you a new one.
I was gonna say, that is a nice thing about the carbon rims, is that, like, usually you do shell out more money in the start, but they are less maintenance overall, and they come with usually a lifetime warranty or some sort of really long extended warranty. But from my days working in the bike shop, the amount of people that came in with a busted carbon rim, they're on a vacation, they cannot wait to get a new one. They end up buying a brand new rim and wheel build on the spot, and it is a little bit devastating in that part. We actually started renting wheels at the bike shop because it happens so much. But that's, it's one thing to consider. What are some other pros and cons, in your opinion, of running either carbon or aluminum?
I mean, if you're someone who's like, say you're on like a huge bike trip, where you know the terrain's gonna be really punishing, perhaps aluminum's better there because you can pull out dents, you can kind of limp it along a little bit longer if it's really getting beat. That said, if you run like durable tires, maybe even an insert and carbon rims, you're probably just not gonna incur that much damage. It also comes down to like what you choose to buy. Like there's XC wheels that are not meant to be super impact resistant, and there's downhill rims that are meant to like get hit by a train and be fine. Yeah, I mean, there's just, you have a ton of options. So I think it comes down to like what specific bike, you know, you look at like enduro, for instance, like they've got to limp a bike along for a really tough day of riding. A lot of them still run aluminum wheels because you can get away with more dings and dents and like really, really bad line mess ups that incur a ton of damage. So
yeah, it seems like a lot of even the downhill racers, I mean, the video that Henry did a couple weeks ago, I think that was in Leah Gang, talking to Troy Brosnan's mechanic about they're still running the DT Swiss aluminum rims because they just like the feel. They like how, forgiving they are out there.
Yeah.
So each to your own. I do wonder, so in this situation, my buddy broke the rim. He had a spare carbon rim. It's the exact same rim.
Okay.
So he reached out to my partner, who's like really good at building wheels. And it kind of presented the question of like, what do you think is the best way to swap onto a new rim? Because what he was doing, Sam, my boyfriend, would just tape the rims together and then boom, spoke for spoke.
Yeah, it's like the quickest, dirtiest way, and it's also like out
Quick and dirty.
for the wheel builder. It's like it makes life a lot easier. I mean, I've done that tons of times. Just
stress on it has to be the same exact rim though, or else.
Yeah, exactly. So like, there's all sorts of measurements you have to take in order to get the right spoke length, and if you're doing your first wheel build at home, it's worth reading all the information there is on that, because it's a little daunting initially, but once you've built a few wheels, it actually is like a really peaceful process. I love building wheels. It's like you just chill, do your thing. But yeah, I'm thrifty at heart, and so I'm not trying to like buy new spokes, new nipples, new all that. I'm just gonna swap them over. There's like stresses that come into spokes over the lifespan of a wheel, and you'll probably break spokes sooner if you keep hot swapping them, but then you just replace that spoke and keep limping along. So
if the wheel's less than like a year old, would you say, or even younger?
It just depends on how it's been ridden. I mean, some people only ride. Let's just say it's been
ridden hard.
Yeah, I would probably just run the old ones, but like if I were different, maybe I would get new spokes. Like a buddy of mine keeps breaking spokes in a wheel of his, and like it'll be like one, then another, but they're like a week apart. In that case, you should just replace all of them, because
I know a guy.
He's
moving the camera.
Yeah, like at that point you've got like some stress issues, and I mean maybe that's like a point with like carbon versus aluminum. Like some carbon wheels are so stiff that they do transfer more stress onto like the spoke side of things. Not to a degree that you're going to break spokes all the time, but a little bit more than you would otherwise.
There's a lot of things to think about, but that's what we're doing today. We're thinking about things, we're talking about things, we're giving you our best unbiased opinions on what we would actually do in those situations. Now, the latest Pinkbike podcast episode, which aired just yesterday, was a heavy tech conversation with Specialized Bikes. I'll link to it below in case you missed it, but if the viewers want to watch it, Dario, what can they expect? A little rundown.
Tech-heavy conversation with the development team behind a lot of the interesting Specialized bikes we've seen recently, like the Demo, like the Enduro, just like it's their ride dynamics team who are in charge of the, let's say, the like very heavily prototype-y end of bike development. So some pretty cool stuff out of that team.
For sure. I'm sure the viewers at home, they love that tech stuff, so check it out. And that's it for today's show. Quick and dirty, lots of chat about suspension and wheels and everything in between. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next week. And if you don't already, please subscribe to the channel. Anything I missed?
I think we're good.
We're good.
Peace.